Court is now in session. I have read the complaint. The people of the state of Massachusetts charge our defendant here with murder in the first degree. That's premeditated murder or murder with intent. Would you please stand, Ms. Defendant? How do you plead in this case?
I plead guilty.
No. Not guilty? Not sorry. That's okay. I got you. Oh yeah, no. Okay, so the plea has been entered. We'll hear our opening arguments by our prosecutor, Mr. Perez.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen of the jury. Today, we are here to discuss a deeply unsettling case involving Miss Narator, who stands before you accused of murder to the first degree for the tragic death of Mr. Oldman she once claimed to care for. The facts of the case as we know them are as follows. At 1 a.m., a neighbor heard a blood-curdling scream from the victim's house. An experienced coroner has verified this as the time of death of Mr. Oldman. The cause of death being suffocation by a mattress. Police arrived at the scene 3 hours after the murder took place, or 4 a.m. There were no signs of forced entry. Miss Narator reported that the scream had been due to her bad dream and continued to explain that Mr. Oldman was away in the countryside. Clearly not. In the end, Miss Narator revealed the cut-up body underneath the floorboards in the house. Strange. The motive behind this crime, as we will explore, stems from the old man's intention to leave his money to her after his death. She was driven by desperation, needing the money now to support her family. She was greedy and impatient, so she could not wait for him to die naturally to collect the money. Miss Narator had all the means and the opportunity to commit this crime. She had open access to Mr. Oldman's house because she was in possession of a house key. Miss Narator was also capable of easily murdering Mr. Oldman. She, as you can see, is a healthy young woman, while the victim was fragile, gullible, and naive. As we dive into the details, you will hear from a neighbor who witnessed unusual activity during the night of the murder, a police who arrived at the scene and assessed the situation, and a coroner who will provide crucial facts about the cause of death. I believe all the evidence will inevitably render the guilt of Miss Narator and prove she is culpable for the death of a poor soul. The defense over here will claim that Miss Narator was simply a caretaker. They will argue she fell asleep in his house after a long shift and awoke from a nightmare, screaming in terror. They will then explain and argue that Miss Narator opened the door to Mr. Oldman's room with the intent to give him his medicine and saw him lifeless, lying on the mattress. For reasons that make no sense, Miss Narator claimed to be scared and decided to dismember the body of Mr. Oldman, placed him under the planks because she believed the murderer could still be in the house. None of this adds up. If you are confused, you're not the only one. How can I believe any of this when Miss Narator's behavior and words are so calculated? Once the police arrived at the house, her odd and anxious demeanor worsened through the night, leading you, Miss Narator, to uncover the body, which lied in the bedroom, hidden beneath the floor. And she proved herself guilty. Miss Narator was too impatient to wait and let the man die naturally, too obsessed with his wealth. She just had to have all the money to herself in desperate times. The facts are complete and the intent is clear. We encourage you, the juror, to keep an open mind, but also remember the weight of the evidence shown to you. Thank you for your attention and for your commitment to justice in this serious matter.
Good morning, good afternoon, Your Honor, and good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen of the jury. You are brought here today so I and my co-counsel can prove whether or not my client, Ms. Narator, the defendant, is guilty or innocent on the account of first-degree murder. After hearing all the facts of the case, you, the jury, will unanimously come to the conclusion that the accused is not guilty. Mr. Oldman passed away at around roughly 1 a.m. The coroner will attest to this. Around the same time the scream was supposedly heard. The coroner will also attest to the fact that the body was most likely suffocated to death by his mattress, due to the fact that fibers from Oldman's mattress were found in various places around his face. From this, we can deduce that Oldman was killed by suffocation of his mattress and the person who strangled him. But he was sleeping, and then when he woke up, he was being strangled. How could he have screamed loud enough for the neighbor to hear if his mouth was being covered? Thus, the neighbor must have lied, or the scream could have come from somewhere else. My client. On the night of the murder, my client, Ms. Narator, came to the house of Mr. Oldman around 8 p.m. to clean. After cleaning for about 4 hours, my client fell asleep from exhaustion. Who wouldn't after cleaning for 4 hours and being up all day? Surely most would fall asleep. But a key detail is that after entering the house, my client forgot to lock the door. In my client's dream, there was a nightmare about spiders. One of her worst fears during this nightmare, she woke up and screamed at about 1 a.m. From 12 to 1 a.m. would surely be enough time for someone to sneak into an unlocked house and murder Mr. Oldman, then escape without anyone noticing. Then after hearing a loud scream, the neighbor waited and reported it, realizing they could seize the opportunity to blame someone else for the murder. After waking up, my client realized she had forgotten to give Mr. Oldman his meds and rushed to his room. Upon reaching the lifeless body of Oldman, she was paralyzed in fear. She thought she might be blamed for the murder. So out of fright, she cut up and buried the body, and then after being pressured by the police and being stressed out, she showed the police the body and admitted to burying him. After hearing all the evidence presented, you must come to the conclusion that Ms. Narator has been proven beyond reasonable doubt to be not guilty. However, prosecution will lead you to believe the contrary, that Ms. Narator is guilty of first-degree murder. Prosecution wants you to believe that Ms. Narator snuck into the room of Oldman was sleeping in, woke him up and suffocated him with his mattress in a struggle, allowing him to scream, and then cut him up and hid him under the floorboards. But this is completely false. First, you must understand that Oldman is frail and a weak old man. There would have been no struggle for my client in her youth years to suffocate him, allowing him no time to scream. Another fact I wish to bring up is that my client had no motive to kill Mr. Oldman. Ms. Narator cared for and helped Oldman regularly. Oldman had never wronged her, and thus she would have no reason to kill him. A person who could have the motive to kill Oldman could be the neighbor. He will attest to the fact that he and Oldman were in a book club together, and therefore they would most likely know each other on a personal level. There are a few reasons why the neighbor might have killed him. Maybe for his money, or he might hold a personal grudge. This is why there is enough reasonable doubt to support Ms. Narator's innocence, and this is why I'm confident the verdict you will presume is not guilty. I thank you all, the jury, your honor, and prosecution, for taking the time to listen to the case and what I and my co-counsel have come up with. And I thank you for executing your civic duty as U.S. citizens in the court of law. I would like to remind you that no matter what evidence is presented, you must all keep in mind to act fairly and reasonably so you can come up with a fair verdict. Again, thank you for your time.
The prosecution would like to call the neighbor to the testimony stand.
Okay, Dylan Demayas is the name of the neighbor.
Mr. Demayas, could you please recap to us, in your words, what happened the night of the murder?
I was reading my book and I heard a scream at 1 a.m.
Is this scream what caused you to call the police?
Yes,
And you called the police approximately 1 hour later, correct?
yes,
This scream appeared to be a scream of a man or a woman.
no,
Man scream. That's interesting because according to the defense over here, the scream was made by Miss Narator, a woman. Can you please recount to us what Mr. Oldman's financial situation was before he passed?
He was a very wealthy man.
I think that's it. Thank you. The prosecution would like to call up the officer who responded to the scene. How would you describe the defendant's behavior when you first arrived?
When I first arrived, the behavior was super super nervous and agitated.
Alright. And did the defendant's behavior progress to get worse throughout the night? Did it worsen?
Yes,
It did.
progressively got worse.
Could you please describe how?
The more questions I asked to figure out what happened, she would just get super more he led me to the old man's bedroom. Then it exhibited no nervousness at first, but as time went on, he began to get more and more agitated. And eventually, he pulled up the rug and floorboards, exposing the body.
You arrived at the scene to the stand.
And I checked the body, and it had fibers in the hair, eyelashes, and mouth, and they matched the victim's mattress.
So you can prove that the cause of death was suffocation.
When I checked the body, it was cut up and inside the floorboards, and then I could verify that the time of death was approximately 1 a.m.
And where was this body found now again?
in the bedroom, in the floorboards.
Under the floorboards.
Miss Narator, can you please explain? Miss Narator, can you please recall to us what happened the night of the crime?
Okay, so I was there when I worked for him. I cleaned his house. I was there since 8, cleaning up his house.
8 p.m., correct?
Yes. Cleaning it up, he has a big house, so it's like gonna take a while. And of course, I was there for like 4 hours, and as anyone, 4 hours working, I'm pretty sure you'd be tired, right?
Yeah.
Exactly. So I fell asleep, listening to my noise-canceling headphones, listening to music. And I had a dream. I was going to fall asleep about spiders, so I screamed really loudly. Now, at the time, I had a sore throat, so my throat, that's why he said a man scream, it was like, oh, it sounded like a man. It's your throat, I said, yes, that's what. And I went up to the room to give him his meds, because, I woke up and I was like, oh shoot, what am I doing? I gotta give him his meds.
But can I ask a question? I'm sorry to interrupt you, but you did say you're his house cleaner. Are you also kind of like a caretaker as well?
Yes.
Caretaker and house cleaner? Okay.
Can you, clarify what time did you fall asleep? Do you know around
Okay,
time?
so that would be 8, 4, so that would be like 12.
And at what time did you wake up realizing that you had to give him his meds?
Like 1, or like 12:40, let's say, about 1
What?
between that.
What time did you give him his medicine?
I gave him when I didn't give it to him because he was
Dead.
but I was going when I went up, it was like
1 or 12:40?
like 12. I woke up, grabbed the meds, and I went up like 12:40 between 1. I don't know the specific time, I can check.
So if you were awake at 12:40, why would the scream not have been heard at 12:40?
Say that again.
If you said that it was between 12:40 and 1, but the scream was recorded at 1, so why would you not have been asleep screaming at 1? You're saying that you gave him his meds at 1.
Yeah, I know. Place. And the first thing to do was to hide him. I, old, he was a little chubby, didn't fit anywhere, so I cut him up and I put him under the floor mats.
Oh, all right, thank you. All right, do you have any questions for this witness right now? Or do you want to? Thank you. Okay, so we are now on to the case for the defense. Is that true, Mr. Mellinger?
Yeah.
Okay. Anybody you'd like to introduce?
Defense would like to call the coroner to stand. So, yesterday, you said that it was clear that there would have been a struggle between the murderer and Mr. Oldman, yeah?
Yeah.
Okay. Would you say that the narrator probably would have been injured in that struggle? Like, would have got hit, like stabbed or something, or like however? Like, would there have been, you don't think they would be injured? Okay.
Objection, Your Honor, on loaded questions.
Or leading the witness?
Or, yeah, sorry.
I'll sustain that, yeah. Yeah, maybe just ask the question instead of kind of telling them. If you can rephrase it a little bit.
Alright, call the neighbor.
So, just to clarify, so you said, right, that they were arguing, right?
Mm-hmm.
And our defendant over here said that they weren't. Can you, like, clarify, like, any times between, like, the death and the point of arguing? And maybe, like, the conversation, like, what they were arguing about?
Started off talking about like the will or where his will would go,
Mhm.
and then they had an argument because I think Mr. Oldman said,
You think? Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. You think? Or is that a yes?
because I was reading and like they're like loud, so I could hear them through my window.
Mm-hmm.
Was the window open?
Yeah.
The defense rests?
Yeah, the
Cool.
defense
You have
rests.
nothing else to, okay, are you guys ready for closing statements then?
Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, as we reach the end of this trial, I ask you to reflect deeply on the evidence and the chilling murder that has unfolded before us. The defendant, a caregiver to Mr. Oldman, stands accused of murder to the first degree, driven solely by her desire for wealth that awaited her in the old man's will. From the very beginning, we have seen this narrator's true intentions. She was not merely a caretaker, but rather someone who had a dangerous obsession with money. The neighbor has shown us that money was on the defendant's mind. In fact, once she was able to deceive the old man into putting her into his will, which is what the defendant and victim were arguing about, she killed him to be able to truly access that money. It is crucial to understand that this was not a crime of passion or a moment of weakness. It was a calculated decision made in cold blood. We're going to show you guys a timeline, and my co-counsel is going to help us here. This is what really went down that night. So, the first thing that happened was that at 8 p.m., Miss Narator arrived at the house for the start of her shift. This is actually one of the few things that she hasn't lied about. So yeah, at 8 p.m., she arrived at the start of her shift. She was getting ready to clean. Next, at 9 to 12:45, Miss Narator spent her time preparing to commit the murder. So she maybe got the knife ready, she entered his room, she thought exactly what was going to happen. At 1 a.m., a blood-curdling scream was heard from the neighbor. This is the only scream that the fragile man was able to let out as a consequence of the rest being muffled by the mattress. Keep in mind that suffocation by a mattress is a way to murder someone that involves less physical strength. The defendants argued, saying that Mr. Oldman couldn't have screamed if he was being suffocated, but consider this. Mr. Oldman is used to having his medicine given to him at 9. His sleep was interrupted at an irregular time, 1 a.m. He had every right to be scared and scream. So next, around 2 a.m., the neighbors called the cops because they've just been thinking about it. At first they weren't sure whether they should, but then they realized maybe someone is wrong. And then, after that, between 1:15 and 3:45, Miss Narator decides to chop up Mr. Oldman's limbs using a kitchen knife to hide it. She places him under the floorboards of his room. She then starts to clean the crime scene and dispose any living evidence. Later at 4 a.m., the police show up at the house. They are welcomed into the house by Miss Narator, who is nervous but manages to keep it somewhat hidden. Later on that night, from 4 a.m. to 5:15 a.m., the defendant's mood progressively worsens. She guides the police around the house, attempting to prove that there was nothing to be suspicious about. In the end, the cops end up sticking around. longer than she wants, which makes her desperate. She pulls up the floorboards and we find the dead body of Mr. Oldman, cut up into pieces. At 5:30 a.m., the coroner arrives and certifies the cause of death, which is suffocation by a mattress, and confirms at the time of death to be 1 a.m., which is also the time of the scream. The defendant is taken into custody. And that concludes what happened that night. So that was our timeline. That's what really happened. Now we're going to show you guys what the defense's timeline looks like. If she has a question, can I ask her?
No, you can't. That's something you're gonna have to talk about.
Events that took place on the night of the murder. First, my client arrived at Mr. Oldman's house at 8 and cleaned for 4 hours and fell asleep. Then suddenly she awoke from a nightmare and screamed, which was later reported after this. She realized she forgot to give Oldman his meds, headed to his room, and found him upstairs dead. In a panic, she cut up the old man, hid him under the floorboards, and later when the cops arrived, after being pressured by many questions, she showed them the body. In this case, my client would need to show a lack of means, opportunity, and motive to prove beyond reasonable doubt and have a not guilty verdict. First, I'll prove that she had no motive. The prosecution would like you to believe that she killed him for money. But why would she when she had a stable income and was friendly with the old man and never showed displeasure with him? Also, the neighbor testified that the old man said that he would, in his will, he would give it to his family, not Miss Narator. This information would surely prove beyond reasonable doubt and motive, but what about means? Yesterday we heard from the officer that DNA was found on the old man's body, traceable to Miss Narator, but none on his mattress. This would align with Miss Narator's story and the fact that she cut him up but had no involvement in the murder. Although she had the opportunity to kill the old man, she had no motive nor the means to commit the crime. Surely with 2/3 of the things the defendant could be accused for being incorrect, reasonable doubt of the murder should be ensured. However, prosecution has accused him mainly because of circumstantial evidence, which only arouses suspicion and does not prove guilt, such as the fact that Miss Narator was in the house at the time of the murder, but this does not prove that she did it. Another point they bring up is Miss Narator's motive to kill Oldman. They argued it's because she needed money, but this is false. As I mentioned before, she had a stable income and living space. Sure, she could use money, but would you go as far to kill someone you're friendly with to get it? In conclusion, the lack of evidence, means, and motive is enough to prove beyond reasonable doubt that my client, Miss Narator, is not guilty. So I asked
Yeah, they didn't check
They
for
said
DNA
they
on
found
the
DNA
body.
on him, but not on the mattress.
There was fibers. There was fibers of the mattress
That
on their
makes
face.
sense that her DNA would be on him because she was his caretaker. She
Also-
would have to help him.
Also, why would they have not called the police? And why would they have cut their body up and shoved them under the floor?
It doesn't make
Why
sense
would
for
they-
them.
Also, if you hear a blood curdling scream, you don't call the police 2 hours later.
Exactly.
1
That's
hour,
true.
1
I don't think we can trust. I don't think we can trust the neighbor as a credible
Any
witness.
of
Here's the thing. Here's the thing.
Even if she does, and they still got into a heated argument about where the old man's money going after he dies, it could still be a crime or like a murder of passion, being like, wow, you don't want to put me in your will, how dare you?
Okay, but
And then it could be murder in the first degree because now you're upset and you can plan it and be
Okay.
like, I don't like that, I want to kill you.
I think true.
So either way, if she had a stable income or not, he didn't want her in his will. So I feel like that's a reason to kill him. So she had the motive to.
I think
A blood?
Oh, sorry.
Right, don't be too loud, they're right after.
Okay, so we all agree on guilty.
Cool! The people of the state of Massachusetts find the defendant, Mrs. Narator, guilty of the charge of murder in the first degree.
I didn't do anything!
We could take this woman into custody.